Happy day. I welcome you all to today's module on Introduction to Consumer Behavior. In this module, we will look into what is consumer behavior, why is it important for all marketers to understand the way that consumers behave, and also in detail, we'll be having a short overview on the different stages which are involved in the process of buyer decision making. Today's consumers have more choices than ever. They research and shop across multiple devices and multiple touch points around the clock in both online and offline modes of shopping. Consumers don't want to travel far from home, and they focus on simple needs and have a fun shopping experience. They won't waste money and time on things they no longer value. This brings us to the concept of understanding and studying consumer behavior as the most important body of knowledge. Consumer behavior, as you see, it can also be called as buyer behavior. Consumer behavior, it refers to the buying behavior of the end consumer after he consumes the goods and services based on his needs and wants. There are few important questions which every marketer will have to ask before he starts making his marketing agenda. The very first one is, what do consumers have to purchase? Why and how do they want to purchase all these products? How often are all these products purchased? And also the place where these products can be made available to consumers. Based on all these questions, the entire marketing program can be designed keeping in mind only the consumer's needs and wants. With this, we can define what consumer behavior is. As all of you can see in this slide, consumer behavior is going to be a combination of the psychological, social, physical behavior of each and every consumer, keeping in mind the entire way of how they become aware, evaluate, purchase and also consume the products, as well as also trying to share the product information to their friends and their colleagues. So that is an entire summation of what exactly is buyer behavior or consumer behavior. As marketers try and understand what consumer behavior is, the most important thing which every marketer needs to understand is the consumer is the king of his business. As it has been rightly told, the consumer is going to be the person who actually defines what is a business and also what is going to be the entire business process. Here on the slide, what we see, we'll be able to look into what are the different reasons as to why is the entire study of consumer behavior extremely very important. Consumer behavior aids the marketer in the STP approach. By STP approach, we mean it is the segmenting, targeting as well as also the entire positioning strategy which the marketer has to do. And of all, the most important thing is only based on the way which consumers behave, the marketer will be able to assess what is going to be the actual trends based on which actual consumer needs and wants can be understood. Only based on consumer needs and wants, the entire product can be offered based on the consumer satisfaction level. Now let us see what are the different stages which are involved in the consumer decision making process. As you see on the slide, we have 5 different stages which make up the entire consumer decision making process. At the first stage is called as problem recognition, or trying to recognize what is the need and want of each consumer. The second stage is information search. The third stage is the evaluation of alternatives, and in the fourth stage we have purchase decision, and then finally we have post-purchase evaluation stage. Each of these stages become extremely very crucial because only based on these different stages through which a consumer passes, each and every marketer will be able to put up a winning marketing strategy in order to capture his target audience. The first stage in the consumer behavior stages is called as need recognition or problem recognition. Now, under the process of problem recognition, it can be influenced by 2 factors. One is the internal stimulus and the second one is the external stimulus or all the external factors. Now, all the internal stimulus and the internal factors, it can be based on factors which are very much personal to the consumers like thirst, hunger as well as also various personal needs. On the other hand, all the external factors are being triggered by the external business environment. Say for example, it can be a trigger which has come from the various promotion strategies that has been bombarded by the marketer towards all the consumer groups. So based on these needs, based on these problems which a consumer goes through in the first stage, automatically the second stage is trying to seek for solutions and answers. So the second stage in the consumer decision making process is information search. In the second stage of information search, consumers start looking into different answers that can be got from various sources. Of all the different sources which are available, the most important source is the personal source. So here when we say personal source, it means it is all information which a consumer gets regarding a product or a service from his very close personal circle, which can include his family, his friends, his colleagues, as well as also all his acquaintances. Now also when we look into public and commercial sources, now all these are different information which a consumer can actually get from the business environment. It can be all the different promotion activities which are being targeted towards a consumer from a marketer's end. While consumers are very actively looking for a lot of information by using all the online searches, the most important element here, what the marketer has to focus on, trying to have a completely updated social media handle, as well as also trying to have a very active website through which the entire online searches of a product or a service can be searched by consumers by using the online medium. Now that the consumer has searched and researched about all the product and services information which he requires, now he has multiple choices before him. So the third stage is called as evaluation of alternatives, where the consumer will take his time to compare and contrast between products and service choices which he has in front of him. The most important element which every consumer wants to compare between products is mostly, it can be the product's price, it can be the product's quality, it can be its most innate features, it can be a product's attribute, and it can also be most importantly the exact brand awareness which a consumer has about all the other brands in the market. Once the consumer has done a thorough research of trying to compare and contrast between the different brand choices, in the fourth stage of purchase decision, he is trying to be influenced about the different brands as to what he really wants to choose. Once the consumer has done a thorough compare and contrasting between all the different brands which he wants to choose, in the fourth stage of purchase decision, what happens is he tries to develop a desire to actually purchase the product which is going to satisfy his needs and want. Now this is going to be the most important stage where the actual purchase is going to be done by the consumer, where he will just have to walk up to a store and where he will have to buy a product, and then the consumption of the product will start from the fourth stage of purchase decision. The last step in the consumer decision making process is called as the post-purchase behavior. This step is very important in the buyer's decision making process because it determines what the consumer feels about the product. In this step, the consumer would probably want to know few answers and ask themselves few questions like, did the product or service satisfy my needs? Am I happy with the product or service I purchased? What would I change in the product or service I've chosen? How do I feel about the retailer who provided the product or service to me? Every marketer needs to understand that the entire consumer behavior process is not over after the purchase is done. Even after the purchase is done, all the different experiences which a consumer gets after using a product, that is going to be the final step of consumer behavior. Either a consumer can be extremely very satisfied, or he can also be dissatisfied after using a product. This stage in consumer behavior is what we called as cognitive dissonance. Hope all of you had a very clear understanding on the introduction to consumer behavior. Now, we will see a short video on the different kinds of consumer behaviors in the post-pandemic era.
Consumers are smarter than they've ever been. A large part of that is due to technology and interconnectivity. But in today's marketing landscape, brands can no longer approach consumers the same way they once were expected to. While the pandemic has definitely played its part, the modern consumer has been shifting into this more woke and empowered consumer, and this has begun since a few years back. As such, while things like the marketing funnel may still be relevant, it's important to re-examine exactly what the modern consumer looks like and how they make their buying decisions in today's increasingly digital world. But before we go into that, it's important to understand just how a person makes a buying decision in the first place. John Dewey, the famous American philosopher and psychologist, noted that there were 5 stages that consumers went through when considering a purchase. The first was need recognition. Here, the consumer recognizes that there is a problem or specific need, and thus will begin their search to find a product or service to satisfy this. Often considered the most crucial step out of the 5, this realization must first exist for a consumer to have any desire to make a purchase at all. If there is no problem or need recognized, consumers most likely will not convert. Once the consumer has recognized their problem or need, they will move on to stage 2 of the consumer decision process, which involves searching for more information. At this point, the consumer is asking themselves whether they could solve this issue, and if not, who or what could be the best option to do so. Third stage is where they evaluate the alternatives. While this isn't a completely new stage entirely, but more of a blend to the one above, it is important to be wary of it. That is where most businesses can keep or lose potential customers. It is no surprise people evaluate alternative products when making a purchase decision, especially the more expensive the item is. You don't want your hard-earned money going into something that might not even be worth it. Once all 3 stages mentioned earlier are done, the consumer makes a purchase. This stage involves the consumer shaping an intention to buy from a service or a product. During this stage, the consumer decides who, when, and where to buy from. A decision is finalized at this stage, and according to the writers of the essay, The Buying Decision Process, the only thing that influences this decision is negative feedback and/or a drastic life change. Finally, after the purchase, the consumer then goes through a process that involves evaluating whether the purchase was satisfactory or not. In this stage, the way the consumer feels will influence how they will respond to the brand in the future. During this stage, consumers may experience cognitive dissonance or a form of buyer's remorse, determining whether or not he or she feels regret for the purchase. Now, there is no denying that people's behaviors have changed since the global pandemic. The modern consumer is no longer searching for things the same way as before, and brand loyalty has changed. While we go into details of changing consumer behaviors in another video, some notable behaviors caused by the pandemic that may influence the modern consumer are things like potential splurging. During the severe peaks of the pandemic, lockdowns and store closures were rampant. As such, consumers have had a dying itch inside, wanting to go out and simply splurge. While in times of crisis and uncertainty, the general tendency is for a person to hold back on discretionary purchases, which for the most part has happened. However, if you hold this long enough, the resulting consequence is an outburst spending spree. There's also been a growing wave of impatience. As of recording this, the pandemic still has not completely ended. While things have calmed compared to a year or 2 ago, many countries still have regulations and rules to stay inside. As such, people are growing more impatient. Ayelet Fishbach, a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, notes that once something is almost over, naturally we become more impatient. As she states, the surprising effect is as things become near, it is harder to wait for them. This, on top of added doorstep deliveries from online shopping, is bound to create a generation of consumers that simply cannot wait. Consumers have also become more technology-enabled. From sheer necessity, consumers have adopted new technologies. Naturally, this has changed the nature of how we share and discover information. The lasting impact of digital technology on the consumer's behavior is pervasive and cannot be ignored. Also, modern consumers have become more curious and creative. On the flip side of staying inside for years, people are becoming more curious to what new skills, tools, and services they can learn from. While some people may be lying around, waiting for things to be over, there is a large group of people that are doing what they can to upskill and be better, preparing for the new normal. As such, the new workforce will be rife with competition, and as creators, there can be opportunity for producing products and services for this type of consumer. Now, typically in the past, marketers have defined specific touchpoints, using the term marketing funnel to express the overall journey the consumer makes to get from awareness to loyalty. While it has had many iterations, the base foundation stems off of the IDA model, where the user discovers the brand, dives deeper into the product, gets more interest and consideration, and finally makes the purchase, thus becoming a loyal customer. While the funnel is still applicable in a lot of cases and shouldn't be ignored, it implies that the journey is more one way than two. It also suggests that the consumers are systematically narrowing their considerations down to buy products. It proposes that brands and marketers are solely responsible for nudging the consumer along a linear process. However, this way of looking at the consumer journey may not show the full picture, as a brand-consumer relationship is much more two-way today. Moreover, it's no longer a linear journey, but a circular one, with 4 phases in which the marketer must work to get the consumer's attention. As you can see from this graph, first we start off at an initial consideration. This is when the consumer considers a set of brands, basing their opinion around perception and exposure. Then they move along what's called the active evaluation phase. This is when the consumer gathers information and filters out the choices. When the consumer chooses who to buy with and makes a purchase, we are at closure. And in the post-purchase phase, much like John Dewey's 5th stage, this is where the consumer sets expectations on their experience and uses this to influence their decision for loyalty. What brands do here is the deciding factor of whether that person becomes a one-time or returning customer. With this more circular journey, where a constant feedback loop leads to loyalty, the modern consumer has become more empowered. In the past, marketing was driven purely by companies, where messaging was put on consumers via advertising and other media channels. However, today, consumers rely on other customers or influencers to help drive their decisions. In fact, during the previously mentioned active evaluation phase in the circular journey, research showed that more than half of those touch points were spent looking at internet reviews, online research, and hearing word-of-mouth recommendations, all of which are consumer-driven marketing activities. This demonstrates that modern consumers have taken more control of the process. Instead of having everything pushed onto them, they pull information their way to make the most informed buying decision.
Thank you for watching this module on Introduction to Consumer Behavior. To learn more and to enhance your knowledge, like, share and subscribe the M.O.P classroom. Thank you.